I figured that was a good way to get started on a late Friday afternoon. You guys needed a little bit of comic relief before we start talking about more serious subjects like cloud computing. My name is Baigent. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development for HP Cloud Services. And unlike what the video says, we actually are serious about cloud at HP. We've been doing it for some time. Interestingly enough, it was started as an initiative when Mark Hurd was still the CEO of the company, so it goes back some time. He collaborated with Shane Robeson, who was our CTO at the time, sort of took a look at the landscape, understood that we were an important player in cloud technologies and cloud deployments across the globe and across multiple industries. But the recognition was, as things unfold over time, it's entirely possible that one or two companies could control all the infrastructure usage of every company in America or even worldwide. And if we weren't one of those companies or weren't the supplier to one of those companies, we could have a problem remaining an infrastructure player long term. So the idea was we'll continue to be an important infrastructure player helping others build out cloud. But if we don't build a cloud ourselves, number one, we can't call ourselves experts in building clouds if we don't have the expertise having done it ourselves. And number two, we run the risk of someone else being the infrastructure provider to the other clouds and putting us, in essence, out of business. So it was a strategic imperative for HP to become a cloud provider, not just a cloud technologist, which we already were, but an actual service provider building public cloud infrastructure in the full mode that is. Self-service, credit card, on the web, RESTful APIs, infrastructure, storage, etc. And so with that strategic edict, HP Cloud Services was born. We came into being initially to stand up an HP Labs project that had infrastructure as a service and compute as a service with a focus on hyperscalability. And we worked on that prior to my coming on board for about 8 to 9 months. It was actually making a lot of progress, but the recognition was cloud is a platform, and as such requires the kind of marketing and ecosystem development and developer traction that any platform does, any operating system does. And so rather than create our own and invest in creating the ecosystem, we'd go take a look at what open source opportunities were out there and chose the OpenStack solution as our platform about almost 24 months ago now. So since then, we've been one of the primary players in the OpenStack space, helping to build out public cloud infrastructure in harmony with the other business units at HP that are building out private cloud infrastructure. So if you look at the market, you know, HP spends a lot of time with a lot of IT professionals worldwide in all sorts of industries. And there's a very clear recognition that cloud is an important initiative. It's playing an important role in IT strategies across the globe. But it isn't, as much as we all might like it to, being a complete replacement for IT infrastructure, nor do we expect it to in the foreseeable future. I mean, hell, the IT industry is still running mainframes, and IBM's still making a ton of money off of mainframes. So a traditional IT, a traditional bare metal approach to infrastructure is going to continue to be an element of an IT strategy, if not the focus point for an IT strategy going forward. So we have a solid business there as a company, but we're also recognizing that even within a private cloud environment, companies and enterprises worldwide are looking to take advantage of what cloud really is. Self-service, highly dynamic, pay for what you want, you know, for what you use and what you don't use, at least in an interdepartmental manner. And as companies move from traditional to private cloud, they're also looking for options where I want to get all the goodness of cloud. I want to have control over the architecture. Maybe I've standardized on a particular virtualization platform and or a particular hosting operating system environment, but I don't necessarily want to own my hardware, in which case I really want my cloud infrastructure owned outsourced by someone like HP, but controlled and dictated down to the bare metal if necessary. That's a managed cloud. And then these are the businesses that HP's been in traditionally all along, but what we in HP Cloud Services now offer as a compatible component to this environment is a public cloud built out, you know, unlike these that have to be standardized and dictated by customer workloads. We're standardized by our ability and necessity of delivering dynamic services. So we choose the hardware and software environment. We serve up virtual machines. We serve up operating systems, and we serve up the components that developers and deployers use to build out applications. But we make the decisions in terms of how that infrastructure works. However, it fits very nicely across this entire portfolio of deployment options when you've got a common platform underneath where an enterprise can standardize on what images do I use, what monitoring tools do I use, what development tools do I use, what deployment tools do I use, and how do I get a single pane of glass view of my entire enterprise when I'm now managing things across the firewall barrier between public and private. It's this hybrid delivery and hybrid management model which we've come to call Converged Cloud. Now that's really playing off of HP's traditional strength in building out infrastructure, servers, storage, and networking that are pre-integrated and pre-tested and ready to go. We've called that converged infrastructure. So it makes sense that as traditional IT has been deploying converged infrastructure and is sort of taking this journey on how do we get to the most dynamic and most cost-effective environment for my workloads, that we call that a converged cloud platform. Marketing speak, but underneath it is actually a true value proposition, which is we want to give you common platforms for you to be able to do the workloads that you need to manage across multiple deployments. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to exclusively do OpenStack. It doesn't mean that we're going to exclusively do anything. We're a company of 330,000 employees with thousands of customers worldwide. They will dictate for us what type of virtualization platforms they need in these environments, and we'll make choices on the public cloud that enable our target, which is being cost-effective, being highly scalable, being highly durable, and being pertinent for the kinds of workloads that customers want to deploy. If you end up with an OpenStack platform, in other words, if you choose to deploy a private cloud built off of HP's Converged infrastructure with an OpenStack environment on top of it, you get additional federation capabilities for really getting true workload mobility all the way down to the virtual machine layer and below across these multiple deployments. And that's really the value of Converged Cloud. The public cloud, as I said, is building out a standardized environment with that sort of OpenStack and hybrid delivery enablement value proposition underneath the covers. So kind of going from the bottom up in terms of what we're building on the public cloud, we start, of course, every cloud, behind every cloud is a data center. So we start with data centers and we deploy the hardware. It's all HP converged infrastructure hardware, compute, storage, and networking. And we build on top of that a set of infrastructure as a service offerings, compute, object store, block storage, CDN, and then enable that with an OpenStack API. So we can take advantage of all the various monitoring partners and platform partners that are building out OpenStack infrastructure. So OpenStack-based infrastructure as a service. And then we sort of focus on a few pillars of value propositions that we go after for enterprise customers. The first and foremost is providing our own version of platform as a service. Now, we're not expecting that our implementation of platform as a service will be the standard for customers. As we've already said, there's a lot of diversity in how customers choose to deploy infrastructure. There's going to be just as much diversity in how they choose to deploy applications. So we also have a lot of platform partnerships and continue to be a strong supporter of Windows environments and .NET for enterprise workloads, et cetera. But our expectation is that if we don't have core services, platform as a service servicing, database servicing, load balancing services, et cetera, then we're doing a disservice to the customers who come to us as a full service provider. So as a result, we do have a relational database as a service offering based on MySQL, and we have a platform as a service offering based on Cloud Foundry. It's actually a redistribution of Staccato from our partner ActiveState. And we're doing the front-end support, the integration, the durability testing, and the scalability testing as we deploy it in our cloud. Then we have a whole series of software as a service offerings from HP. So HP is a software as a service company. We've got properties such as Snapfish and our ePrint for location-based printing across the globe, and a myriad of others. Our Vertica analytics solution is now running as a service in our cloud. We've got a whole series of search and data mining capabilities out of our Autonomy acquisition. And there's a whole slew of HP properties and capabilities that are being built up now as SaaS offerings that customers and partners can consume directly. We're also going to distill out of that certain capabilities, image rendering APIs, and other facilities that can be plugged into applications for enterprises to leverage in their deployment to really make a very powerful suite of high-level APIs and capabilities. We're also very proud of building out a strong partner ecosystem. The partner ecosystem helps deliver value for end users. It helps to deliver components that developers need, databases and monitoring and security environments, and we'll give you a little more detail on that in a slide or two. So we're focused on enabling partners in this environment to help enable customers. And then last but not least, interoperability. So I've talked about interoperability at the OpenStack level. We're also working on standards and with partners like RightScale for interoperability at the platform level and for orchestration interoperability and ultimately interoperability between multiple disparate clouds like Amazon, Rackspace, HP, GoGrid, name your favorite one. Because again, we recognize we want to have a stake in a certain technology area and use that as our default position for customers who need to get their full service from HP. But we're never doing anything exclusively. So our expectation is customers will always use multiple solutions. They demand that of the marketplace, and we want to enable that because we don't believe in vendor lock-in, and all of our strategy sort of proves that out. And then layered on top of that, we're enabling a online, on-demand marketplace, primarily for customers to be able to get access to all this goodness underneath in a single push-button format, but also to expose partnerships and capabilities like that with RightScale to our end users and customers who are going to come to the hpcloud.com website looking for solutions they can leverage for deploying a pan-HP or even a pan-cloud solution. So that's still coming. That hasn't quite been developed out yet. But all of these components then fill out our entire offering, designed to make sure that enterprise customers in particular, but really any developer with a website and a credit card, can come to hpcloud.com and get started immediately on developing applications that have these assets and capabilities. As I mentioned, hpcloud.com is our website. I encourage you to go check it out. Anyone with a credit card can sign up and start firing off VMs today, a la the cloud. Sounds so simple to those of us who are familiar with it, but I'll tell you, I talk to traditional HP customers who say, okay, can you send me the contract? And I'll answer, you don't need one. There's a click-through. You have to have your lawyers read the click-through, but click-through. And, all right, well, then I need 6 servers, and I'll need them in 3 weeks. The servers are all there, sir. And fire them off to your content. Well, I need large ones, and I need small ones, and I also need some block storage. It's all there. You just put in your credit card. And once they try it, they're really quite amazed. And this is, they're clearly not the standard customer that might come to a conference like this, but it's a lot of HP's install base that are still getting their heads around what does dynamic delivery really mean, especially coming from HP. It's something they're not quite used to. Hence the onion video that I was showing at the beginning. We operate one of the largest public clouds based on OpenStack. Rackspace, actually we had the largest cloud until Rackspace recently made their move to Nova, which is the compute platform. We'll probably surpass Rackspace not too long, and we'll probably leapfrog one another. I don't really expect either of us to pull back on the throttle when it comes to deploying capacity for the OpenStack crowd. The appetite is huge. We have thousands of compute nodes, multiple petabytes of storage. We use a lot of our HP software assets to help harden and enable the underlying platform. So we have software such as ArcSight, Tipping Point, Fortify. These are all things we consume in the HP Cloud Services environment as hardening the underlying infrastructure. And we can also offer it as capabilities to customers running VMs on our cloud in order to get those security capabilities from that software. We've done a lot of additions and extensions to OpenStack, including command APIs. We just launched one for Node.js, language bindings, and really helping to harden and fill gaps that exist in the OpenStack space. We're a full community member, so all of the innovations that we do at the OpenStack level, we contribute back into the community because the rising tide floats all boats, and we're actually taking a lot of advantage of the capabilities that were there in OpenStack, and we're recognizing that value by committing back to them the kinds of innovations that we're contributing. And we have Keystone, which is the OpenStack-based project for identity management, plus our identity capabilities behind the Keystone interfaces, Likewise with Cinder, which is the block interface, but our own implementation of block storage, which is highly scalable. So the OpenStack model is standardized APIs compete on implementations. Most OpenStack providers are using Nova and Swift as the implementation for compute and storage, object store. But when it comes to a lot of the other components in OpenStack, innovations happen on the part of the provider, ourselves, and standardization happens on the API level, which is developed in the OpenStack community. And that way, developers and deployers get to have a standard interface, whether they're getting cloud infrastructure from a Rackspace or an HP or in a private cloud from one of any dozen of vendors that do OpenStack deployments. As I mentioned, we contribute all of our stuff back. We're one of the leading contributors to OpenStack. They had the OpenStack Design Summit in Portland last week. We had an army of HP people in there, both presenting blueprints, which is sort of the future design elements of OpenStack, as well as talking through code contributions and governance models. And we're a platinum member of the OpenStack community, which means we're on the governance team and help design and draft and point the community in good directions going forward. And we don't do that merely because we think open source is cool, which we do, but because customers really want to see a democratization of cloud environments. It's one thing to have an Amazon that you can go to quite quickly and create virtual machines and deploy on their cloud infrastructure. It's quite another to end up getting locked into a platform where all of your development assets are tied to the facilities and capabilities of a public cloud provider and you can't move. Then you get stuck. And so what they really have, one of the key attributes that we get when we talk to customers when what they want from a cloud provider is no vendor lock-in. So they're not happy with the choices of a VMware private cloud and an Amazon public cloud. What they really want is a common infrastructure regardless of where they choose to deploy their workloads. And that's what our dedication is to, and that's why we're in the OpenStack community to begin with. Here's a quick summary of our products, and keep in mind that products I put in quotes because in this world it's a service exposed by an API. But it's the core compute, which is the OpenStack Nova implementation. It's Object Store, which is OpenStack Swift. It's our application platform as a service, which is Cloud Foundry based from Staccato from ActiveState. It's a CDN, content delivery, that's empowered by Akamai. So you can see that we've done a very good job of bringing together sources of technologies and capabilities and wrapping it in a solid enterprise service and support model and taking our expertise on building out data centers to help make sure that the whole thing scales and actually functions. We have a relational database from MySQL. We have one of the chief co-founders of MySQL, Brian Aker, is working for us doing our database as a service. Extremely robust and performant. That's our expectations. It's still in beta, so it's coming GA soon. And then a block storage implementation based on a product out of HP Labs. That makes our portfolio of core services. And then, as I said, we're building out platform as a service offerings and capabilities on top of that. In fact, just recently, we announced a couple of core initiatives. First and foremost, we added a channel, a reseller channel to our cloud, which means, strangely enough, we're actually going to the folks who traditionally have sold HP servers and disk drives and cables and enabled them to sell public cloud services, which is a bit of an odd mix. But the truth of the matter is when they go talking to customers who are buying infrastructure to deploy, those same customers also want public cloud. They also want no vendor lock-in. They're also interested in what's happening in the OpenStack space, and they all want to do cloud. So having a reseller channel reference sell and or resell the capability of deploying things in the public cloud makes a lot of sense to the resellers. And they see this as a way of remaining pertinent with their customers and perceived as being cloud savvy and state-of-the-art. So they've been glomming onto this program significantly. And it helps give us broader reach because as a company, we wouldn't necessarily be talking to small to medium business customers or things in various regions or verticals. We use our channel partners to get there. We also have a program for global systems integrators, same basic story, but these guys are more around consulting and doing kind of these big deployments. And then maybe more interestingly, we offered a couple of new services, a load balancing service, a cloud monitoring service, a DNS as a service. And people who've been using Amazon for years, these are sort of table stakes, but as you're building out an infrastructure as a service offering from scratch, these are the kind of things you tend to layer on. And so eventually we'll get to the point where we have as full a service capability as anybody in the industry. It's probably worth talking a little bit about what we do from a data center standpoint. We're very focused on being experts on infrastructure deployment, architecture, and optimization. That's what HP does as a company. And one of our key advantages in coming to market as a public cloud provider is taking all those capabilities and applying them to the public cloud. When you compare that to where some of the other industry players have come from, they're more about taking their operational skills and expertise and distilling it into something that someone else can use. Well, that's fine and dandy, except you're tied into, if you don't do things similar in the same vein that that provider does or where they've distilled their service from, you're going to be at a disadvantage. We're instead taking our optimization capabilities as an IT professional or set of IT professionals and building up an infrastructure from there. So our designs in terms of data centers come from the years of experience in how do you put together a resilient platform, cloud or otherwise. So we've deployed in 2 different regions, in US West and US East. Our expectations are to have physically separated availability zones in both areas. So these are big data centers. They're co-location data centers, but they're large. And we've looked for independent power systems, independent ISP drops, and the kinds of things that make you resilient to the outages that tend to hit some of our competitors. If you remember, not too long ago, there was a big power outage in the East Coast, took out a lot of East Coast data centers. Our data center was hit, but the entire thing remained up because of our redundant power. So anyway, this is really just to give you a sense that this is currently a US-centric service. We will be expanding into Europe and Asia in the not too distant future, but focused on being highly resilient and reliable because that's what enterprise customers require when it comes to deploying cloud services. So that was all my sales pitch on what we're all about and why HP actually could be and should be viewed as a serious player in public cloud. We're relatively new to what's going on in public cloud, but we're taking advantage of a lot of short circuits, multiple partnerships, open source, our existing expertise as a data center and IT provider. So we're making rapid progress. We went into public beta pretty much exactly a year ago, May of 2012. We're already into general availability on our infrastructure services and are making rapid progress. So we came from a far behind, but we're making that up in agility. But we're also highly leveraged in terms of how people are using the cloud and how we enable them with solution partners to be able to be a more effective use of the cloud. So it's about looking across the enterprise and seeing what are the typical use cases for an enterprise customer who wants to use public cloud. Now, they use the same use cases in general in private cloud, but we're focused as a public cloud provider on what are the people trying to do with public cloud infrastructure first and foremost. And it tends to fall into a variety of categories. The 5 that we're focused on are backup and archive, file sharing and collaboration, which are both object storage-based use cases and are really starting to kind of bleed together as these technologies mature. And then, of course, development and test, which is really one of the ways that most public cloud users cut their teeth on public cloud, is they want to develop something quickly and they don't want to take the time to procure it in their data center, so they go out to an Amazon or Rackspace or an HP, get a VM and start developing. So we're focused on that. Also application transformation, which is about taking your existing application assets and finding ways of making them auto-scale and making them more resilient and robust, and taking advantage of a public cloud environment to make that happen. And then, of course, big data and analytics. Being that we acquired Vertica, we see big data and analytics as a core competency for the company and also as a use case for public cloud. It helps to add value to the object storage workloads that we'll be getting, because the really good data analytics do both structured and unstructured data, and we've got tools that help that happen. Basically around object storage and compute, because those are the things that we provide today, and taking advantage of a fairly healthy ecosystem of partners that help us get that done. And I'm sorry about the formatting here, we've kind of over-covered this, but we have storage partners, we have management and orchestration partners, platform as a service partners, data services partners, monitoring and security partners, applications, which is really sort of SaaS partners. That's a growing area. It's a relatively small area now, but it's growing. Development and test partners, and then some what we call technology partners. These are actually ones that help us enable our cloud as well as help some of our customers interface, like Zuora that does our billing. So all of these guys have a desire. Most of them have cut their teeth on the cloud markets. These are relatively small companies and new companies in most cases, like RightScale. But they have a desire to get credibility and access to the enterprise market, which, as I said, is going through this journey from traditional IT to private cloud to public cloud. And somewhere along that line, they'll get into a public cloud environment where these guys are ready to engage with them. But more often than not, these companies are as interested or more interested in having that conversation in a private cloud deployment. So partnering with HP gives them a unique access to the market and a unique position to be able to start conversations with customers. RightScale is our premier partner when it comes to management and orchestration. They actually sort of fit a variety of different use cases, from big data and analytics and dev test through application transformation, and also help create that application vending machine sort of model where you can design your application once, deploy it. I have to tell this audience exactly what RightScale is all about. But our integration with RightScale is relatively young. We've been working on it for a while and have just come out with sort of a 1.0. We're now one of the infrastructure targets that are RightScale, coming off the RightScale console. You can pick HP Cloud Services as a deployment target. And our real interest in partnering with RightScale, we've made a lot of traction with this so far, is helping an enterprise who really wants to manage multiple workloads efficiently across different AZs within our cloud or between private and public to have a single portal and partner they can turn to help create that orchestration. And that's really what RightScale helps fill in for us. And we're seeing a lot of traction and interest from enterprise customers who are just getting started in the public cloud deployment space in using a partner like RightScale to help enable on an enterprise class cloud like HP Cloud Services. We also have partnerships with a bunch of storage gateways. I mean, really, these are the guys that do the heavy lifting on the front end to help get object storage workloads into the cloud. They take care of encryption and decryption and deduplication, as well as kind of eventual consistency synchronization with the public cloud. So this kind of appliance, you can get both a virtual and physical appliance, plug it into your data center, target your existing backup systems to it, and as the data is stored on the appliance, it's then eventually backed up into the cloud for disaster recovery and global access. A lot of companies are seeing this as the better way of doing cloud integration for their storage requirements, rather than trying to do their own implementations of throwing things up to the cloud manually. We also have partners that are focused on doing the same thing for small to medium business. One of the beauties of cloud is we can access and talk to the biggest companies in the world and help get into their IT strategies for deployment. But we can also, through our channel, talk to the smallest companies of the world, even individuals, and start providing for them infrastructure for deploying their storage workloads on a cloud infrastructure from an enterprise provider. Gladinet is sort of our easy to use. It's a free file cloud drive kind of solution that scales up to a collaboration and synchronization solution similar to the Riverbed, only without the appliance. I've talked a little bit about ActiveState. They do platform as a service offerings based on Cloud Foundry. And again, their Staccato offering is packaged in a way that it's easily deployable as a private PaaS, something that you would deploy in a private cloud environment or even in bare metal, and give you the same interfaces and capabilities, Heroku-like capabilities, from traditional IT environments through private cloud, through managed cloud, and through public cloud. And like our partnership with RightScale, this just helps to enable and simplify deploying and managing applications across multiple tiers in the enterprise. AppZero is an interesting partner who focuses on helping transform legacy Windows applications from traditional IT and bare metal kind of environments into the cloud. So their technology is uniquely capable of analyzing a legacy Windows app, understanding all of its Windows dependencies, abstracting those dependencies away. Then you can do a single lift and deploy into the cloud, and the AppZero environment that's done all that mapping then sort of fades away, and you really have a truly cloud deployed Windows application, and they can do that in a very short period of time. Now, none of these applications, unfortunately, are turnkey. It's not like you just snap your fingers and they're suddenly in the cloud. Every single one of them has slight nuances in terms of how you have to manage cloud environment and multi-tenancy that's different than a behind the firewall. And so we have enterprise services from HP. We have the ability to apply professional services to a lot of our solutions. so you can get a professional services engagement that helps actually finish off the movement of an application into the cloud. So application transformation means services to HP, and therefore is a very interesting business model. DataStax is a Cassandra-based NoSQL environment, fully supported on HP Cloud Services. They're a fairly aggressive, highly scaled, clustered provider of data services in the NoSQL space. And we've got a lot of traction with them in enabling our big data analytics capability, because ultimately you've got to create and store data in the cloud in order to do analytics on it. And so we have partnerships that help IT customers use their cloud environments to collect and store data in the Cassandra database. Then we can plug in a Vertica solution on the top to get intelligence out of that data once it's collected. And that's just a quick sample. I kind of went through it relatively rapidly, but I wanted to get some concrete examples of how we're accelerating our ability to get to market quickly, having come late to the public cloud market, by leveraging partnerships, by leveraging our existing skills and capabilities, and by really deploying quickly a very robust and very capable set of cloud services. So with that as an introduction, I'm very happy to take some questions or comments, or we could just let you all go. It's a late Friday afternoon. You're probably all exhausted. We could just show the Onion video again and just have a... But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. All right.
2 hard questions per person. That's all he needs. No, I didn't have a question.
So I'll bore everyone with one last question. Do you guys do any direct connect peering in those colos that your public cloud is in?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Do you guys do any direct connect peering at those colos?
Absolutely. In fact, it's one of the things that a lot of... we chose our co-location site specifically because we would be located next to a lot of other big data center partners and some of the existing managed cloud capabilities that HP already deployed, so we can do those high-speed connects and get object storage and compute working really effectively. Yeah, we do that. Behind you.
Hey there. What is the infrastructure difference going to be, if any, between the actual infrastructure side of a Rackspace OpenStack deployment versus HP's? Or is it the differentiation just going to be at the service layer?
Well, so there's likely to be a very different set of architectures in terms of the actual hardware, storage, server, and networking between what we deploy and what a Rackspace would deploy. I think it's one of the key areas for service design and deployment. So we actually design and deploy our cloud at the rack level. You'll see a lot of the folks in the private cloud OpenStack space talking about OpenStack's install CDs. Because one of the things OpenStack doesn't do very well, by the way, is install. You can't just download it and install it on a laptop. So a lot of companies, smaller companies, have come by and said, hey, Mr. Customer, I can load up 100 nodes of OpenStack for you. Just take this CD, do Pixie boot, load it up on 100 servers, and away you go. What that fails to do is recognize that for true scale, you have to be able to optimize not just at the software level, but at the hardware architecture level. Distilling out certain functions out of the object store and putting them in their own isolated server helps create scalability and performance. And exactly how you do that is a rack-level design. You've got to worry about network throughput. You've got to worry about cooling. You've got to worry about... there's a whole series of data center design elements that go into creating that. Rackspace has their own, and I'm sure it's quite different from ours. What we've been able to do is kind of take all of the years of experience we have in doing a variety of workloads and apply that to an OpenStack implementation. And to be honest, our first iteration wasn't there. We're on our 3rd iteration, and this June we'll be deploying our 4th iteration, and we're starting to get to the point where we have a lot of very valuable and unique intellectual property built into our rack-level designs. So I think to answer your question, to you as an end user who wants to fire off a VM, it's not going to really look any different. But you are going to see differences in overall performance and throughput and robustness and reliability, especially if you use it in volume, because of the different architectures from different cloud providers.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that HP uses HP software products for security, for HP Cloud Security. And do you use, additionally, do you use any system management software for that also?
We're starting to. When we originally deployed our OpenStack implementation, we used the general capabilities that the OpenStack community had developed, mostly Puppet and Chef and some of the open source tools. That's what we deploy today. But we've been working with our sister business units, the software team, on how to take their enterprise management tools and make them more OpenStack aware and savvy. And we'll be deploying kind of OpenStack versions of that in our next iteration later this year. So right now, today, no, but coming soon.
All right, understood.
And just as a side note, it's actually a very interesting point because as being a service provider, a public cloud service provider, and getting the learnings of how you run that at scale and what the issues are and how you manage it, how you deploy it, we're feeding all that input back to our other business units. So they're designing more efficient hardware, lower cost hardware, more usable storage implementations, more usable network implementations, and more usable tools across the board. So all of HP is benefiting from our experience.
All right, understood. Thank you.
Anything else? That was more than 2 hard questions, so I think you can let me off the hook. All right, thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.